How can you get the most out of a home showing? These days, especially when inventory is very slim, and often you only get one chance to see a house before you find out that all offers are due the next day or something like that, and you might not have the chance to go see it again. It's especially important to get the most out of your home showing. So, how can you do that? Well, there are a couple of things that I would recommend you do prior to the showing. The first thing is to ask your buyer agent if it's possible to get a copy of the seller's disclosure. That way you can look through and see if there are any things in there that might be points of concern that you could make a note to especially look at when you are there. So for example, if it says there's some kind of water problem in the basement, or if it says the roof is 22 years old, you might take a look at it and see if it looks like it's in really bad shape, or anything else that might be disclosed that you think you could possibly want to give your attention to were you to buy the house. You'll know ahead of time, if you've been able to see the disclosure, what some of those issues are. The next thing is I strongly recommend using a Google Street View as well as an overhead map view of the area to identify anything maybe in the neighborhood that could be something you'd want to know more about. For example, is there a commercial or industrial facility at the end of the block? Or there could be good things. Is there a park or a playground located just at the end of the street or the next street over? So it's a good idea to kind of get the lay of the land ahead of time. So those are some things you can do before you're heading out for your tour. When you are getting ready to go and meet your agent, there are a few things that I suggest you bring with you. A measuring tape is probably the most important one. That can come in really handy if you have particularly large furniture, or you want to have a place where you know you can fit your piano. It's always good to have that with you. Also, not a bad idea to have a flashlight. The one on your phone is okay in most cases, but sometimes basements are dark or attics are dark, or if you go to a showing in the evening, it's just a good idea if you have one handy to bring a flashlight. If it seems appropriate, you might also bring an inspector with you for a walk and talk inspection, which is an inspection that only takes about a half an hour, and the inspector doesn't write anything down or take pictures or give a written report, but he looks around at what are mainly the big things, the structural things, systems, windows, roof, HVAC, things like that. So if you think you might be serious about a house, sometimes in order to write an offer that's not contingent on an inspection, people choose to have a walk and talk inspector come with them. It can be hard to arrange that very quickly, but it's always worth a try. And it's also not free, so you don't want to just assume you're going to do that with every single house that you look at. It's more likely to be reserved for houses that people think they're going to genuinely be likely to make an offer on. And the last thing is something to take notes with. A lot of people do that on their phones. Some people take a little notebook, but you may want to just write some things down. Once you arrive at the showing, pay attention to the neighborhood. Are there street lights? Are there sidewalks? Can you park on the street? Some of those things that are more about the street and the neighborhood than the house itself. Then pay attention to the exterior part of the house. And I don't mean just the house itself, like the siding or the roof, but things like the driveway or patios, or maybe there's some landscaping that needs to be done, or there's a lot of trees overhanging the house. Think about the property and the outside of it and costs and any concerns you might have about those things. Once you're inside, you really want to pay close attention to the condition of the property, and you also want to think about which things you might want to update and how long you could live with them the way they are. For example, if you see a kitchen and say, well, I'd have to redo this right away, pay attention to that. Make a note of that, because you're going to have to figure out how much that's going to cost you and whether it makes sense if you are thinking about a bid. Note the condition of any hardwood floors or carpeting. Do the walls need to be painted? All of those things you'll want to be thinking about. Most people also like homes with a lot of natural light. So to the degree that you can, it'll depend on the weather and the time of day you're looking, make a note of whether the house gets good light. And another thing that tends to be important is storage. That can be basement or attic type storage for things like suitcases or bicycles, but also just even clothing storage. What's the closet situation? Is it enough? How about kitchen or pantry storage? I also recommend that when you're in a house, you, with permission from the agent, you take a video that you narrate so that you can remember later what things you really liked about the house or what things were of concern. So, for example, you can have your phone on video and you might walk into the kitchen and say, I'm concerned that there's not enough pantry space. Because if you just pause and hold your video at the pantry, when you look at it later, you might not remember why you were doing that. So to narrate it as you go is very useful. So those are just a few tips on how to get the most out of a home showing.